And now, with no further ado, I want to recognize Scott Howe. His bio is out on our website, and you can find it there. But needless to say, he was at Microsoft. He's the new leader of the 6,200 associates at Acxiom. Sitting next to the founder of Acxiom, it's a real treat for us to hear from Scott Howe, Chief Executive Officer of Acxiom.
Thank you very much. All right, let's just check we're on. I think we're on. So first off, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your afternoon with me. It's such a treat for me to come and spend time with you all. And particularly, I mean, what a wonderful lunch, a chance to catch up with Charles Morgan, who has just been a mentor, and, incredible founder of Acxiom and a real link for me to Acxiom's past and just a constant sounding board. And also Mary Good, Dr. Mary Good, who a long time on our board. I think either one of them could, quite frankly, talk more eloquently about Acxiom than you'll hear me speak. But I'll try to do it justice and encourage, if I miss something, either of you two guys, just jump in along the way. The challenge, I tell you, I speak a lot. But this is such a different crowd today because typically when I speak, I'm going in and talking to like a room full of major advertisers or publishers, and we're getting really like geeky on how big data works and how to apply it. And this is a really different audience. So I created a really different set of slides, and my goal here was just to kind of illustrate what is big data, how does it work, and then from an investor perspective, how do you play that? What are the companies that are doing what in big data, and give you a framework to think about that. So I thought I'd start by talking about the fact that we are in a really, really interesting part of history right now. And all of you have lived through the same thing that I have. I actually, this weekend, I was doing a room inspection for my kids because they had really messy rooms. So I went into their rooms, and I have a 13-year-old daughter. Right? And she has all these bookshelves, and there's books all over the place. And I'm like, yeah, okay, she's a big reader. And then I went into my 9-year-old son's room. Not a book to be found. Does he do any less reading than my daughter? No. But my 9-year-old son can never remember a period of time in which there wasn't a tablet, there wasn't an iPad in our house. And so he has hundreds of books, but they're all on the iPad. I keep reading these amazing stats that my iPhone has more computing power than what powered Apollo 11 to the moon and back. Right? And I know at Acxiom, we do 30 trillion transactions a month. We process that. I can't even wrap my mind around 30 trillion transactions a month. I know it's 20 times that of what Google does. And it's just this huge sum of information that's being processed digitally. And we've all seen the stats of last year, Google did more information than all history combined, right? Leading up to last year. I mean, just, you can't wrap your mind around it. But yet, in an era that technology is exploding, the one quote that everybody in the room, if I said, what's the one quote you know about advertising, you would all say, oh yeah, I don't know who said it. The guy was John Wanamaker. 1884, he said, I know half my advertising's wasted, I just don't know which half. And it's still true today, because we all live it. We see awful advertising. We call a call center and we have a bad experience. We go into the dealer that should know us, and they don't know us, and they treat us poorly. And so in this age of incredible science and information, why is marketing and sales, why do those still not work? Why are they icky? Why do we ever have bad experiences? And our belief at Acxiom is that in the next decade, we're going to see a company or a group of companies that do to the inefficiency of making decisions in marketing and sales the same thing that Microsoft did to workplace efficiency, or Google did to the efficiency of finding something, or Apple did to the efficiency of consuming media. 1,000 songs in your pocket was the original iPod slogan, right? And it's going to be about how do you harness the power of data. And that is why people talk about all the time, they throw out this concept of big data. So what is big data? Let's demystify it. And actually, before I even get into that, why the Wanamaker paradox? Why does that exist? And I would hypothesize to you that there are three fundamental reasons, all of which can be solved. First off, there is a tremendous amount of data that all of us are creating about ourselves every day. And there has never been more data available to the world, to businesses, than there is right now. But it's really hard to get your hands on the right data and make sense of it. Second is even if you have all this data, it is incredibly difficult to figure out what it means to transform raw data into insights. And I don't know if, how many of you actually go to the office every day and try to figure out the answer to a problem. Well, oftentimes, if you have an answer to a problem, you say, well, what's the data that I could analyze to figure out what the answer is? And if you're in marketing, oftentimes you'll get a statistics query guy who will go into the back room and run a regression and 2 weeks later emerge and tell you what the t-squared is and what the numbers mean and give you a bunch of fancy plots and graphs. And out of that, you're like, I don't even speak that language. I don't know what that means. I don't know what the math actually tells me. I don't have the insight. It's just too hard because data should be as simple and intuitive as the calculator on your desk. And then finally, is even if you had brilliant insights about the conversations that you wanted to have as a marketer, you mine the data, you figure out exactly what it meant, and you want to do something with it, it's impossible to do something with it because the insight itself oftentimes isn't actionable, and I'll explain why here in a second. So let me illustrate what each of these mean. And I'm going to start with a story about the Howe family here, just to make it a little bit more interesting. And this concept of no single view of a customer, no way to capture all of the information. And in a sense, when people talk about big data and what marketers are trying to do, I want to be very clear about what it is they're trying to do. In a sense, metaphorically, if you kind of get under, they want to capture a bunch of information so they can have a better conversation and deliver a better experience to you. Well, what does that really mean? It means that the goal of a global marketer is to almost create, metaphorically, the world's largest spreadsheet. One that had a single row for every person on the planet, 7 billion rows. And it had hundreds of thousands of columns, one for every observable piece of data. And when that marketer has an opportunity to have an interaction with you, the consumer, they just do a simple VLOOKUP in that spreadsheet and say, I see, this is Charles Morgan. This is what I know about him. And as a result, these are the kinds of products and services and experiences in which he may be interested in. So that's what people are trying to do. The types of information that can be collected include things like demographic information. So I am a man, I'm married. I have a family of 5, 3 kids, 13, 11, and 9. I recently, 2 years ago, became the CEO of Acxiom. I'm originally from Wisconsin. I also, in addition to having a place in the First Security Building, my family also has a house in the West Coast. And this is the car I drive in the bottom right there. It's only I've really only ever bought one new car in my life, and that was in 1990. I'm going to age myself. I graduated from college, and so I bought a Ford Explorer Sport. I still drive it today, and it has about 160,000 miles on it. So those are some good, demographic, just interesting pieces of information that a marketer might want to know about me. But there also could be, fill in a couple rows on the spreadsheet. Some behavioral information. So for instance, when I bought my condo here in Little Rock, I had to shop, and I did a lot of online purchases from Amazon. Likewise, being from Wisconsin, I'm a huge Packers fan, and so any given year, I probably go to 4 or 5 Packers games. And because I have a car with hundreds of thousands of miles on it, and I have a family of 5, but my car only seats 4, I have been shopping for a new car, and so there's a picture of the car dealership. Some cool behavioral information. Populate a couple more areas of the spreadsheet. There's contextual information. What time is it? Because, I am going to respond, for instance, if I'm a charity, I know that people respond best to charitable messages on the weekends when they're with their family. If I am Best Buy, I know that people are going to respond best to my messages on Monday or Tuesday morning when they're back at work, typically at about 10 a.m., when they have their coffee break and they want to buy something that they, piece of electronics they might have thought about over the weekend. And then there's things like online versus offline versus CRM information. As I was shopping for my apartment, I went to Williams-Sonoma. I went to the physical store. I bought some stuff online. And over time, Williams-Sonoma started to develop a profile of me so that they knew what kinds of things I might be interested in future. And when I have all that stuff, I start to develop and populate the entire spreadsheet. And that entire spreadsheet starts to create a picture of who is Scott Howe. Scott Howe ultimately is nothing more than the amalgamation of all of my disparate data points. Right? That's me. Data completes the complete picture. So that's cool, and you probably all get it. But here's the aha for this, and this is why getting to that raw data is so important. If I have no data whatsoever, and I am a business, then I can't probably make a very informed decision about what offer I serve, what ad I give, what experience I offer to a customer. But if I even have one piece of information, so I know, for instance, what time of day it is, I can generate, on average, 132% lift versus not having any information at all. In contrast, if I know, something about someone's behavior, so for instance, I know that Scott went to the GM car dealership because he's interested in buying a car. And I can incorporate that into my messaging. Well, over 1,000% lift versus untargeted messaging. That's cool to know too. But it is always, always, always the case that the best experiences, the best messages, the best ROI is achieved when you combine all of those data elements together. So if you look at the multivariate segmentation scheme aimed on all of someone's information, it's 6,000% lift. That's transformational. And think about, the John Wanamaker thing of I know that 50% of my advertising is wasted. Well, advertising in itself is $1 trillion industry, so it's a $500 billion prize that businesses are trying to unlock. And a huge prize for consumers if they don't have to listen to all the just shameless, horrible advertising and have horrible experiences. So this is one where really everybody wins, and that's just the advertising industry, let alone you start to add in commerce industry or sales revenue in there as well, and then all of a sudden the prize gets to be much, much bigger. All right, so when they talk about big data, kind of point number one is data matters, and more data is always better, and better quality data is always better because it generates transformational lifts. But even if I had all the data, there's still this problem of what do you do with it? How do you transform a bunch of raw data into insights? And this is the second challenge of big data. So, what did we learn? Well, we learned that I am a guy, I am from Wisconsin, and I go to a number of Packer games every year. And so, it stands to reason that if the right marketers knew that, I would get targeted offers for people who like cheese and the Packers all the time. Likewise, and this is probably a better example, family of 5, shopping for a car, two-door Ford Explorer Sport that, we squeeze 5 in there, but the middle kid in the back seat doesn't wear a seatbelt because it really only has 4. So, GM armed with that ought to be giving me an offer to test drive a Denali. It solves a huge problem for me. And that's when, the raw data becomes something valuable. Valuable for the marketer, but also incredibly valuable for me, the consumer. And let me give you an example of that, sticking with automotive, for instance. Instead of just using an absence of data and spamming the world, big data users can instead start to create predictive models. And we've helped some of the world's largest car manufacturers create models of who are the folks that are likely to test drive a Denali. Who might be interested in fancy sports cars? Who might be interested in fuel-efficient cars? And armed with that, the ads that you'll see and the messages that you'll get and the offers that you get are much more effective than the absence of any information. All right, home stretch here in terms of examples about me. And that leads me to the third problem in data. And that is, even if I collect all of the right data, and even if I figure out what it means for each person in this room, what kind of offers that you want, what kind of information you want to see, what kind of experiences you want to have with the brands that you care about and the companies that you respect, I can't do anything with it. It's like I speak a different language as a company than the publishers through which I message you. It's like I know that someone who looks like me should get the ad for test driving a Denali. That's Scott Howe. He needs the ad for test driving a Denali. He needs that offer. But when I go to Google and I say, I want to reach Scott Howe, they say, I don't know who that is. I know of cookie 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I go to the television network and say, I want to reach Scott Howe, they say, well, I have a demographic of people who watch certain types of shows. On the web, they say, well, is that ScottHowe@live.com? Is it Scott@Acxiom.com? Is it thescotthowe@gmail.com? Or is it showe@yahoo.com? And direct mail. Is it the Scott Howe in Little Rock? Is it the Scott Howe in California? Is it a Scott Howe who lives in New York? I actually went to school in college with another guy named Scott Howe. And we used to get each other's mail and messages all the time. So it's confusing. You can't actually act upon this unless you have connections with each one of these entities that allow you to essentially overlay a translator on top of this blueprint and put it into language that each one of these partners can understand, such that me, the consumer, gets a consistent message and consistent experience across email and direct mail and radio and television, such that I draw a consistent, cohesive view of the brands and companies that I respect. That is the challenge of big data, and it is the software problem that we're trying to solve. So 3 challenges. No single view of the customer, difficult to transform it into insights, and it's very challenging to take those insights and put them into actions. 3 problems. But as quickly as you understand, like, oh, those are the 3 challenges, you can start to squint and see software can change those. This is the divide that I was talking about earlier, that technology has come so far over the last decade that these problems can be solved. And big data companies are all vying to emerge to solve these. And think of these problems slightly a different way. And this is the way we think about them at Acxiom. There is the raw data problem, which is really about data loading and activation. How do I go access all of the data in the world? There's the refined insights problem, which is really about creating a data refinery that helps me take all of the raw data and process it into high-octane, brilliant insights. And then there's this application challenge, which is about how do I take the insights and connect them up to everybody who can activate those insights? How do I communicate those insights to Facebook, to Google, to a direct mail partner, to a television station, to a call center, to a cataloger, such that they're armed with that insight and can behave accordingly? And if you think about, from an investment perspective, how do you play big data? And how do you invest in big data? There's a couple different ways. So first off, on the application layer, there's a lot of noise over the last 12 months about the traditional big five enterprise software companies. Adobe, SAP, Oracle, Salesforce.com, and IBM. Each one of them views big data as the opening of another door for them. They are all vying to create the enterprise software stack that sits on the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer's desktop, whereby which that CMO can control all of their outbound communication in future, all of their advertising campaigns, all of their call centers, and deliver this seamless, cohesive message, right? And what's been going on in this space, it's just been a feeding frenzy of acquisitions. For instance, Oracle, 2 weeks ago, bought a little startup, hit about $40 million in revenues called BlueKai, for which they paid nearly $500 million for. And, you know, a company called Demdex was acquired. Responsys, ExactTarget by Salesforce. I mean, just a wave of acquisitions. In fact, in the last couple of years here, it's something like $5 billion has been spent in acquisitions as those big five enterprise software companies ready themselves to build the stack that the CMO of the future wants. It's one way to play it. Another way would be to invest in a group of what I'll call the emerging MSP agencies. And again, sorry, this text here is really small. But those are folks who not only provide software, but as importantly in their minds, they provide the service that goes along with it. And they're kind of the new breed of advertising agency. Not just about the creative idea, but about all the data and the targeting and the science that goes along with it. And so companies there are folks like Epsilon, that has created a full suite agency solution to go along with their data marketing and management capabilities. Some startups that have IPO'd in the last year and have had just meteoric growth. A company called Rocket Fuel. Rocket Fuel does algorithmic logic that takes and processes massive amounts of data, and they price the results on a cost per performance, cost per activation metric. It's all performance-based pricing. And they call it Rocket Fuel because it was founded by a bunch of former NASA scientists. Company called Criteo that just specializes in remarketing also went public this year. And both of those companies, when they went public, like literally tripled the stock price in the next few days. And then even the traditional agency holding companies. So if you have like a Publicis or a WPP in your portfolio, both Maurice Levy and Martin Sorrell, the CEOs of both of those respective organizations, have said that data management, understanding big data, are their most important priorities for the years to come. So that's one way to play it, either of those two stacks. A second way to play big data is to instead focus on the companies that collect the raw data. And so public companies there would include D&B, that is business data. It would include Experian, who collects a lot of data about people and they have a big credit bureau, but they also have a division that is focused solely on marketing data. What's interesting is there's not a whole lot of companies in this space because a lot of the data providers today are actually small niche private companies that, quite frankly, you've never heard of. And they're focusing more on digital data collection than some of these larger folks. And then the third way to play it, and this is how Acxiom approaches the world, would be in this, we're primarily the middle and bottom layers. And we don't really have a whole lot of companies like us. There's another public company called Neustar that bought a data management platform and has made a lot of statements that they see the world the same way we do. And it's not entirely surprising because the number 2 at Neustar actually was one of my direct reports at Microsoft. So I think they probably do see the world the same way that Acxiom does. And there are pros and cons to any one of these approaches. I will tell you from Acxiom's view, if these folks here think that they're building telephones, we view our role in the ecosystem as laying the telephone wires. If these folks here think they're building cars, we metaphorically think our view of the world is to power those cars with gas. If these folks here think that they're building home appliances, well, our belief is that what is needed is someone to build the power grid. So it's a question of how do you play it as an investor? The raw materials, the refineries, or the end-use applications? And I don't know. I think the proof will be, we'll see it in the next few years. I don't think anybody does. If I did, quite frankly, I wouldn't be standing in front of you as the CEO of Acxiom. I'd be an investor, and I'd figure this out and, be the next Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett. All right. So a parting thought, and this is really important. And what's sad is you never hear anybody from Acxiom say this because although in every interview I have done in the last year, when I talk to 60 Minutes, when I talk to CNN, when I talk to the New York Times, when I talk to the Wall Street Journal, when I talk to Senator Rockefeller, I always say the same thing, which is you might be surprised to know that Acxiom is in favor of much stronger privacy regulation. And we are. Because this kind of data mining, it comes with a price. It comes with a price, which is, you might be sitting in the audience and you feel a little bit like I do. A little bit like 80% of the rest of Americans do, which is if you ask Americans about how do they feel about data, 80% of them say, it feels a little bit big brotherish to me. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable for companies to know this amount of information about them. But yet, 76% of those of the population, almost perfect overlap, say it's okay if I got something of value back in exchange for it. Which is, I will share my information with you if in fact I get money for it, if in fact I get better offers for it, if in fact I have better interactions with the companies I love. If I get something in value, then it becomes like, managing my car maintenance or my house or anything like that. It's like I take care of it. I watch it. I manage it because I know if I do, there's a payoff for me. Not everyone feels that way. 10% of Americans don't want their information used no matter what. And so it's important for those 10% to have a choice. As a result, Acxiom, about 9 months ago, became the first company in marketing history to expose all of the information we have about users, give them a mechanism to come in and look at it and change it. Or better still, if they didn't want to participate, opt out entirely. And it's amazing. I haven't really shared this information. But when I did the modeling, the board was like, you're crazy to do this. And we kind of modeled out and said, well, I think it's going to be like, maybe 15% of Americans are going to opt out because that's what the numbers tell you. And in fact, we have had, for folks who have visited the site, the opt-out rate is less than 2%. The most common thing that visitors say is, how can I tell you more about myself so I get more advertising from the companies I love? You know, Americans want to have a relationship with Apple. They want song downloads. They want to have a relationship with Nike because they love that brand. They want to have a relationship with Google. And so if you could help them make a better match and exchange information to get better offers and better experiences, you know, our peers in the world seem to be very enthusiastic about that. It has to go beyond just notice and choice, though, and so you'll see us publish in the coming days. We've shopped it with the New York Times, you know, and it's amazing. Like, none of them want to publish this because it doesn't make for a good storyline. They want to tell the story of big bad data against the American population. They want to have a villain. And in fact, we're saying, no. We think that much stronger safeguards. So we think 5 things in particular, and we're trying to push our legislators to create a consumer bill of rights. So first off, enforcing very stringent data collection methodologies, such that if someone's collecting data about you, you know it. It's not invisible. It's not sneaky. It's not surreptitious, it's not spyware, but you know about it and you have a chance to say no. Limit data use to marketing information only. You know, we think there's almost unlimited amount of information that companies, if they wanted to and had bad intent, could collect, and we think that's wrong. That information about healthcare, your health records, or information about children, information about the elderly, you know, vulnerable groups, that shouldn't be part of it, and it should be for marketing, not for making credit decisions, not for making financial decisions. It should be used for marketing. Restricting the use of sensitive data, we'd like to see tighter regulations around that because we believe that there are groups around who are vulnerable, the elderly. I mean, no one should have the right to figure out who are the vulnerable areas of our population and design products to prey on them. There are no regulations that prohibit that right now, and we feel that there need to be. And enforcement of security and breach, right? And when we saw this, how many of you guys remember the Target thing that happened around Christmas? It was awful. And it seems like every day it felt like you were opening up the paper and another chapter was coming out. And in part it's because there are not strong data breach and notification laws around when do you need to notify consumers that their information has been stolen and in what time frame. And we believe that much tighter legislation is required there because, you know, data shouldn't be a scary thing. Data should be a wonderful thing because it can unlock such incredible experiences for us. I'll give you an example of that. I work with Disney. You know, there's probably no company in the world more sophisticated than using data than someone like Disney. And they have always said that someone always owns the moment, but no one at that company ever owns the customer. If you think about it, if any of you have been to like Disneyland or Disney World, I mean, you have these amazing experiences. You walk in, they're so nice to you. They send you, great direct mail offers. Everything about the Disney experience is amazing. But what they're starting to do is say, okay, rather than have all these amazing interactions, I went to see a movie, I went to a theme park, I went on a Disney cruise. What if we thought about that from a personal perspective around not experiences, but the customer journey, such that they know I'm going to the theme park, and imagine if I walked in with my daughter and they saw her at the front gate and said, Lauren, it's so great to have you here at Disney today. And we know that your favorite Disney princess is Cinderella, and Cinderella is in the castle right now, and if you want to go grab a photo with her, you should get over there. She's leaving at 10:30. I mean, that's the kind of thing that would transform, a good experience at Disney to something that could be amazing. And if any of you are parents who have taken your kids to Disneyland, or Disney World, imagine, you know how special that is when you see the world and your kids just light up. That's the kind of experience that we could be having with all our brands, with all the things that we love. But it will only happen if, tightened regulation ensures that the bad guys don't do bad things with the data. So finally, I'll end with this. Above all else, Acxiom, and we think the good players in the industry, we encourage them. It is about transparency and choice. Let's make sure that all consumers know exactly what information is being collected about them and what it's being used for, and have a choice to opt out if they don't want to participate. So on that, I will end and transition to questions.